All right, guys, thank you for coming. Welcome to the What Product Does Healthcare Industry Sell panel discussion at the HealthTech RapidConf January event, hosted by the HealthTech Networking Club. I'm Lindsey Williams, founder of Corylus Consulting and co-founder of MyUTI, and will be your moderator for this panel discussion. The monthly HealthTech RapidConf events are organized by the HealthTech Networking Club, an exclusive networking club that brings together influential members of the health tech community. If you'd like more information on the monthly HealthTech RapidConf event series or the HealthTech Networking Club, please head to the Bene Studio website. To all our members, if you haven't already, we urge you to leave a comment in the general Slack space about our topic of the month for the chance to contribute to the Health Tech Guide. More details are available in Slack. As I said, we're going to start this panel discussion. I'm going to briefly introduce myself and the panel, and we will jump into our topic. So as I said before, my name is Lindsey Williams. I'm the co-founder of MyUTI, a femtech platform aimed at providing a frictionless care continuum for women suffering from chronic urinary tract infections. And we have also with us, Julie, will you start off, and then we will move to John and end with Chris.
Absolutely. My name is Julie Kopp, and I head up product and marketing at CirrusMD. We are a virtual care platform that is text first based, and we deliver barrier-free access to care at the highest quality, the lowest cost venue.
Thanks, Julie. Hi, everyone. My name is John Chabot. I lead our middle market sales and account management at Bind. Bind is a startup health insurance company, and we work with the power of big data to enable customers to understand their treatment options as well as the price variability that exists and help them make good decisions in both treatment path and variability in pricing.
Hi, my name is Chris Saxman. I'm a healthcare executive and serial entrepreneur. Most recently, I helped build CirrusMD from the point where we were, I joined as the first non-founder and built it from the point where there were just a few of us to where we are now with over 100 people, including the wonderful Julie Kopp, where I had the pleasure of working with her. And I left there in August to pursue my next adventure in healthcare. I'm on the board of a few startups and have been mentoring companies and have been just enjoying really thinking about what the industry needs and where things are now. And, you know, that's maybe a good segue. I want to sort of set the stage for this panel by throwing out a proposition, which is that our industry, the healthcare industry, really sells just one product, which is health. Why is that? Well, people come to the industry if they're sick and they want to become healthy again, or if they're well and they want to remain that way. They don't come for any other reason. Julie and I had a chance to talk about this recently. We decided, well, if the next thing we need to do is define what we mean, in this case, by health. And I think where we kind of came out, and Julie, correct me if I'm wrong, but is that health means that one's body doesn't get in the way of what you want to do during life or what you need to do, such as taking care of your children or going to your job. Put another way, people don't want their lives disrupted by poor health. Okay, well, with that defined, next thing I want to bring out is that there's a rather massive economic structure mismatch in the way the industry works today. It's fundamentally structured as a B2B industry. Large payers, large providers get together in a room, negotiate a contract, and that's how business is done forevermore. But it's not a B2B industry. It's the fundamental B2C industry. If you have $1 left, you'll spend it on your health or your children's health, won't you, right? Because of this economic mismatch, individuals have no agency over their own healthcare. Or their own health, and to me, that this economic structural mismatch and the fact that people don't have agency is the reason why there's so many misaligned incentives that we all talk about in the industry. Okay, so given that people want health and there's this mismatch, how do we go to a B2C industry? How do we transition to a B2C industry? Well, I'll point out that there's sort of three industries that all address one's health. There's the sick care industry or our current healthcare industry. There's a wellness industry, and then there's people working on social determinants of health, which can determine up to 80% of a person's healthcare outcomes. They all deliver to health, so perhaps we could merge all of those into one health industry. That's the proposition, the idea. That industry would sell health to valued customers, and we would view them not as customers, but rather or not as patients or members. Those are statistical constructs. We talk about population health, or we talk about member populations or patient populations. But a customer isn't a statistic, it's a person. To sell to that person, you have to do it one person at a time, and you have to deliver perceived value to that person. A health industry could deliver a complete product around health, and I think Julie can talk about that more later on, the concept of a complete product. They can provide health sort of cradle to grave, and by doing so, they could or generate long-term recurring revenue if they deliver a delightful health experience to their patients. Doing so will give agency back to individuals over their health, and hopefully will align all of the misaligned financial incentives, including those of individuals. Okay, so that's the proposition. But now let's look at reality. Really, this vision I just laid out is meant as a thought exercise. There are many real-world considerations we have to address. I mean, from a moral point of view, whenever somebody is seriously ill or injured, there's a massive inelasticity of demand, and there's a massive asymmetry of information that the individual suffers relative to the provider. So we have to address that. And then there's lots of real-world considerations. They're just practical ones. The healthcare industry is massive, and there's lots of entrenched interests. There are many legal and regulatory constraints. And then I think probably the biggest issue is that simply people don't think about purchasing health. How do we convince them that this is what they ought to do? So at the end of the day, I believe that innovators should use this health as product framework that I outlined really to inform the real world decisions they make as they make incremental changes. It is not a call for mass or wholesale overhaul of the industry. And I wanted to make that clear as we now launch into the discussion, and I'll sort of do that. I think it's going to be an interesting discussion around what are some of the, what might productizing health at the margins look like. I'm excited to hear what John and Julie bring to the table. And more importantly, I think this is something where we don't have the answers. We don't purport to have the answers. We need everybody's voice. So please use this opportunity to chime in and have side conversations in the Slack channel as we talk. With that, I'll hand it back to Lindsey, and let's get going.
Thank you. We have spent so much time discussing this, and it's such a fascinating topic. So I'm really excited to dive into it today. As Chris said, this is really more of a thought exercise. So kind of allowing ourselves to take the barriers and restrictions of the existing system out of our minds for the purpose of this conversation, and allowing ourselves to imagine, right, what could be possible. And at the end, hopefully we have some sparked innovation ideas, right, around maybe we can't overhaul the whole system, and that's okay, but what incremental changes can be made in the existing system that we have now to make it better. So I know one thing that was mentioned early on, and that's the first thing, which is ultimately who is the consumer, and that is the patient, right? So Julie, in our conversation the other day, you had some really great points around user experience, right? And the experience of a patient and healthcare and the healthcare system. Do you mind sharing with us kind of your thoughts and just what you've seen in your personal experience, right, professionally as well, in terms of what that means and what could we look to in the future to improve that?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Lindsey, and thanks, Chris, for setting this up, setting the stage for us. The approach that I've always taken in my career with product is very user-centered design, customer-centered design. And what's interesting with healthcare in particular, whether it's you're selling into supply chain, whether you're selling into delivering care, whatever it is, there's someone who's buying it, but there's someone who's using it. And in our case, there's two very distinct users of our solution that's integral to the care delivery and really humanizing it. And that's the provider, the clinician, and the patient or the customer in that point. And so what's really important is we have to start there. So much of what we see today is the digitization of the way it works in a brick and mortar or the way it works currently in the system. I think what Chris has really posited here, which is fantastic, is how do we put the user at the center of this, the consumer, the true consumer of the health, the person who's actually getting the care? How do we put them at the center of the conversation, no matter what we're delivering or what we're solving for, and make sure that we're really understanding that whole person? Oftentimes, even with the best of intentions, we tend to be one and done, which is essentially what healthcare has normally done, which is you come in for something, usually sick care, take care of you. But really, I think we have to start to look at that whole person. And as Chris sort of alluded to, from cradle to grave, because it's a continuum. And you want to be able to have that healthy lifestyle all the way through. But when something does come up, it's centered around your needs and around what you need. So what that includes is not just the care, but the resources, the access, the ability to navigate easily, the ability for you to make sense of your care. And I think that's one of the most, the largest opportunity we have out there is start to break down the complexity of healthcare and put that, that ownership and empowerment back into the user's hands to be able to make the best decisions possible. And we know that when we give people options and choices, they'll make better decisions. So the more we inform people, the more we understand what meeting the person where they're at and giving holistic care, the more successful we're going to be. As Chris said, we're not going to be able to solve the whole thing, but I think individually, as we start to think about this, the more we put that user at the center, the more we're going to start to break down the way it's always been done and start to change and affect even the financial models of healthcare.
Yeah, and actually, John, speaking of financial models, you had a really great analogy the other day talking about how the auto industry has actually done this really well in terms of that, well care versus sick care model. Do you mind sharing with the group?
Yeah, thanks, Lindsey. Appreciate the opportunity. And yeah, I think of, I'm a person of analogies, and oftentimes I think of ways that we interact with the system in ways that we interact with other areas in our life. And when you talk about healthcare and what we sell in it being health, we get there, unfortunately, through being sick. And I mean that in that if you think about the way that we end up being healthy through the healthcare system, we typically end up in the healthcare system with an event, whether it's a heart attack or even something minor. Unfortunately, we don't get there through trying to create health and actually avoiding those particular situations. And the analogy I always give people is, if you think of the auto industry, we've made a really good habit out of getting, or have created a habit of getting people to get their oil changed every 3,000 miles. And it is unbelievable how much of a habit we have created with those individuals to go in every 3,000 miles, get their oil changed, and the amount of effort that they put into the preventive care of their vehicles. If we could get a tenth of that with personal health, we'd probably be in pretty good shape. But if you think of the system and the way it's designed, I always tell people, if you design roads and interstates, you're going to get traffic. If you design bike paths, you'll likely get people biking. If you create sidewalks, you're likely going to get people walking. When we create a system, unfortunately, that treats sick people, what do we get? We get people that are sick, and then we treat them back to health. And unfortunately, that, I think, is one of the main problems that we have, is we don't engage, as Julie had mentioned, we don't engage with people prior to actually entering the system and help them lead a healthy lifestyle. We don't help them get their oil changed every 3,000 miles, unfortunately.
Yeah, and from a design perspective, Balint, I mean, I think that's something you and I discussed just the other day in terms of the business model that you have to look at it from an innovation perspective too, right? What are you designing for? Do you want to share with us your thoughts?
Yeah, thanks for the question, and pleasure being in the panel discussion. And my name is Balint Bene. I'm the CEO of Bene Studio, digital product consultancy. We are focusing on health technology. So I would like to bring these experiences into this panel. And let me join to John's point. And I would like to highlight the business model first, because what I can see is an increasing popularity of the direct-to-pay methodologies, and I think it's a fundamental question when we talk about user experience. The first question is, who is paying my bill? Am I paying it directly? So I have the full control what I'm purchasing, or I'm dependent on some kind of coverage, some kind of plans or insurance or anything like that. So it's two different ways. And from a product perspective, first we have to see these differences because it's a fundamental question.
Yes, and Balint, my apologies. I just realized we didn't even intro you on the panel. I'm so sorry.
No problem, no problem. I did it.
Well, one thing that you both mentioned actually, and John, I'd like to kick back to you on this, is supporting patients in terms of, we don't have people come in, right? Like you get your one annual wellness exam. From a payer perspective, right? From an insurer perspective, what needs to shift?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think when you take a look at just the design of the system right now, so if you look at most of the health plans, in fact, I'll use an HSA for an example. About 30%, in excess of 30% of the market is on an HSA product. And what do those HSAs do? They're great for people that can actually fund those HSAs and create a mechanism to be able to pay for their healthcare. It works out fabulous. But for those individuals, unfortunately, that can't fund or maybe don't get HSA funds from their employer, all of a sudden now we've created this huge barrier for them to actually come in and get care. And if you think about your last encounter, for example, with the healthcare system, and I used to go out and do a lot of speaking to employees and try and help educate them on their plan. And one of the things that the health insurance industry does says, hey, you know what, if you don't have anything wrong with you, you can come in and we're going to cover those particular visits to make sure that you stay healthy at 100%. But as soon as you're diagnosed with something, now all of a sudden that's diagnostic and that's going to hit your deductible. And we've got, unfortunately, a lot of people in our population that once they're diagnosed with something and have that large out-of-pocket expense, we've just created a huge barrier for them to actually come in and get care. And again, you think about the situation that we're in, lower funding with HSAs, larger deductibles just in general with people. There's a lot of Americans, unfortunately, that are having to make the choice about putting food on their table or paying their rent or paying their mortgage versus actually paying a couple $100s for maybe it's diabetic supplies, maybe it's just that preventive visit to check their cholesterol. And then again, we get into this continuum of those things manifesting, and all of a sudden now we're dealing with a heart attack versus a high cholesterol, or we're dealing with diabetic situations that if we could have just made those services available to those individuals, we would have avoided those catastrophic claims. So again, we've gone into this continuum of treating people versus actually making healthcare accessible to individuals at the front to help them avoid those situations.
Yeah, there's some interesting comments here in the chat. Chris, I want to get back to your point, but Connor's actually brought up, where does the panel see the role of genomics being used by insurance and payers to incentivize more healthy behaviors, avoiding the sickness costs?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And I won't even say genomics, but if you go to even alternative treatments, at Bind, one of the things that we really emphasize with people is to explore what your options are. And it's really cool now, we've got this power of big data, right? So we can take a look at billions of lines of claims information and really start to understand how people have the best outcomes when it comes to their health. So whether that's genomics or maybe it's physical therapy versus actually going under the knife, with the power of big data, we can really start to understand what has the best outcomes at the lowest cost, both to the employee as well as the employer and the insurer. So I do think that whether it's genomics or other particular items, alternative treatments, whatever actually helps somebody lead a healthy lifestyle, we're always in favor. I always tell people with chiropractic care, like I always thought chiropractic care was something that was a little bit holistic and not up my alley, but I had, unfortunately, some back pain, and I'm like, all right, I'm going to give this a shot. And at the end of that chiropractic visit, I was relatively pain-free. And at the end of the day, that worked for me. That was the outcome that I wanted, regardless of how I get there, whether it's acupuncture, chiropractor. As long as I leave there feeling healthy, then I'm getting what I want out of that system. And encouraging people to try those alternative treatments is certainly something that we need to explore.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point and goes back to Chris's discussion around agency. And I think this is something that we've all talked about kind of in preparation for this panel, but there's a fine line between giving patients agency and then also pushing all of the responsibility, right, to them, especially when you're dealing with lack of education in terms of all of the new innovation. And how do you balance that from a user experience perspective? And Julie, I'd love your thoughts on this in terms of the responsibility to educate patients and inspire them, right, to take control of their own healthcare and empower them, but yet still have a shared responsibility in providing the right education, guidance, and support.
Yeah, and I actually, just to sort of piggyback on what John was saying and the question that was asked, it goes back to treating that whole person. And what we really look at is trying to figure out whether, you're an employee of an employer that's purchased our system or on a plan. We're looking at all the benefits that are available to you. And so while we can treat most things on the platform, what is the next step in that care? We never want to leave anybody alone. And so providing, again, additional resources, whether they're benefit resources, additional programs that have been invested in, community resources. And I think once we start to look at not just the whole person, but the whole person in the context of the community in which they live and what is available to them. One of the things we started to talk about was that access to care. Well, there's so many in our country where there's, they live in absolute medical deserts, transportation deserts. So that access, while we, want to give them control, they often don't have access to what they need. And so how do we use things like data, like genomics, like all of these other resources where they have maybe some access or some information we can get to them to make better choices about their care? And so, as you said, Lindsey, it is a partnership from the medical community, from the different resources and agencies that are out there to better inform people, and then to make it easy for people to get that information, but also get access to the resources that they need, whether it's in person, digitally, online, virtually, whatever it is. But we have to start to connect it, because what we're still doing these days is we're creating little point solutions. And at the end of the day, it's really difficult for a user to have to figure out, where do I go next? It's no different than the brick and mortar we experience today, which is I go to my doctor, but then they say, well, you have to go to get an x-ray over here, and then you got to go follow up with the specialist over here. Bring it all together for them. And so that's where I talk about the navigation. If we're truly user-centered focus and human-centered, we're focused on what the human needs, and that human in a time of like needing care, they can't think about how they're connecting everything. We need to connect it for them so they can make the best decisions possible.
Balint, I think you were going to say something there. Did I cut you off before? No, maybe not. Okay. I think this is an interesting point from a design perspective. I also think this is really interesting in thinking about the context of data, big data, and especially AI, right? So leveraging genomics, leveraging a lot of this stuff. And I think I think it was Balint that said, the biggest issue that we have is sometimes the lack of context. So from a user design, from a technical perspective, integration is so important, and yet also providing context for this data, right? Balint, do you have some comments on that from your perspective?
Yes. So as Julia and John mentioned, keeping healthy the people should be the new goal, instead of curing the sick people. And for that, we need to have some kind of scale or something which helps us understanding what does it mean someone is healthy, because it's really easy to report that, okay, there were a visit, there were cure, there were something which is the transaction-based thing, which can be paid for. But it's really hard to define what does it mean. Balint is already healthy. What's the responsibility of that services which I used for that? So I think first we need some objective measurement, how to measure that health level. So I think if we have this, then we have a lot of new opportunities for smaller and bigger initiatives and inventions.
Yeah, and actually Mike commented here in this chat saying, my concern with giving people agency is that people are prone to inertia. And this is actually a really good point, and one that we discussed in terms of, daring to dream and take off those guardrails. And yet at the same time, looking at this opportunity and rapid digital transformation in the healthcare space, in some ways, a parallel to what we saw with the rapid transformation digitally with just big tech in general, right? And how can we learn from some of those pitfalls and mistakes that maybe we couldn't have thought of prior, but now that we can see in past tense, we can apply to the healthcare realm. And so Julie actually brought up, just the concept of aligned incentives. And I think that's a really important conversation to have in terms of how the system works now versus how we can create a system that has more aligned incentives so that internal inertia doesn't happen in terms of patients having too much agency and actually not capitalizing on it. Julie, do you mind chiming in?
Yeah, no, I think that it's an excellent point. And I think, Balint and others have referenced this too. What we see a lot is people need information in the context of care. One of the, not to vilify Google, but it's really dangerous when people go out onto Google and just Google things, and it'll come up with so much information. It's information overload. And so how do we create the right system or the right connections where there's ownership for the user's perspective, there's ownership on the clinical side, there's ownership in that sort of agency or the other responsible parties, that together they're trying to really bring the right information at the right time in the context of care. And an example is that, really empowering people to understand that if I've never had any joint issues and I have a knee issue and I'm talking to a doctor and they say you need to go, get an MRI, it would be great to be able to provide that whole context of information for me to make the best decisions. What is an MRI? There's many different kinds of MRIs. Which is the best one for me? What does my insurance cover? What am I going to have to pay for it? What does it entail? How do I make that decision so that I feel confident in taking care of my health? And so I think that's where the opportunity is to better connect that so that there isn't this inertia and that there isn't this this need to try to figure out from all these different sources, how do I make those best decisions? And again, I sort of will be a broken record, but it all comes back to really understanding the user's experience. What do they need in the context of care? Understanding that often they're at a heightened stress level, concern. They may be, leading from emotion as opposed to really trying to understand. And they rely, we've really created a culture, at least here, of really relying on doctors to make decisions. And how do we create a more shared decision framework?
I only laughed, Julie, because you mentioned Google, and I think I die or am on the path to death just about once a month. I'll say something to my wife and she'll come up and she'll say, I just did an internet search and I think you need to make an appointment because I think you've got this. And I'm like, you need to get off the internet because everything that I have doesn't necessarily lead to death. There might just be minor aches and pains. So I totally agree with you 100%. The other thing that I think is worth mentioning around this inertia and potentially giving individuals, or the concern about giving them agency, is people are actually pretty smart, and I think we do need to give them some credit. And that is one of the challenges that we run into all the time. We try to give individuals enablement over their healthcare decisions, and we do that on a technology platform. And again, we make it really, really simple for people to make good decisions on their healthcare path. But the number one obstacle that we run into are employers saying, my employees can never do this. And I always have to remind them and say, if you go out back to your warehouse, probably 90% of your guys are making changes to their fantasy football lineup on their smartphone. Like, they have smartphones, they know how to use them, and they're actually pretty technologically savvy. If we start to give people credit and we give them good information and good sources, they can start to actually make pretty good decisions. We do that all the time. We've got over 100,000 members now. We enable them. We've got 70% engagement on our technology platform. And we're starting to see that when you give people good information, they make good decisions. We're reducing the cost of pregnancies by showing people providers that have great outcomes at lower cost. And again, if you make people aware, they make good decisions.
Yeah, John, let me chime in there. I like you. I'm a person. I'm a person of analogies, and I mean, think about what it was like to buy a car 20 or 30 years ago. It was a pretty painful experience, wasn't it? You had to go into a dealer. You had to look around. You had to go to many different dealers. There was no price transparency. You never really knew if you were getting a straight deal or what. But now you can go on eBay Motors and buy a car with a click. There's Carfax. There's so much information. And I think the good news is that our I like to ask people, why is it that we're sitting here in 2020 talking about digital health, not like, say, 1997, a year after or 2 years after Netscape IPO'd? And I think the reason is that it's the business model. There's no incentive for the current incumbent players to do things differently. But if we create that opportunity, if we begin to give people agency, well, first of all, that's going to create incentive for change, but it also, I think, creates a requirement or an imperative on our part as in the industry to provide them the tools they need, because of the fact that, especially for major issues, this is a really important decision. So you can't just give them agency without giving them the tools they need and the ability they need to make the right decisions. But the good news is that in the whole rest of the economy, we've figured out how to do this. And for some pretty complex industries, I'm confident that that we can do the same here in healthcare over the next X number of years, if there is a business model to pay people to do that. So there was an interesting question in the Yahoo chat that I wanted to sort of address, which was around, is this, who's going to pay for this? And is this just for commercial people, say, that have bind insurance? What about Medicaid? What about people in Medicare? And I think the answer is that it goes back to what I was saying earlier, that innovators have to use this insight as a starting point, and you have to make your decisions using this as an insight, but not as an absolute guide, because again, that's one of the complexities that we face in the real world. I've spent a lot of time working with Medicaid regimes around the country, in particular here in Colorado, and you have to fit within the constraints there. But I think the key point is here that people on Medicaid are still people. And they, as John was saying, they know how to do an awful lot on their smartphones. And they deserve agency every bit as much as anybody else does. It just has to be tailored to the constraints and the framework within that a particular Medicaid program might lay out. So I think that's the answer, is that, again, this is a general insight, and then it's up to all of us as innovators to figure out what that might mean for a particular situation, and to design a particular product feature, if you will, or product to meet a particular person's needs.
Chris, I think that's a really good point. And something else in terms of, agency for patients, not just a shared decision-making, as Brittany had commented in the chat around collaboration and collaborative efforts with physicians, and not necessarily having one entity, the physicians or the patients, own the total burden, right, of the process. But an aspect of this that we haven't fully addressed is the role of price transparency in allowing patients agency to make decisions, right? And price is a massive barrier, and there's really not a lot of transparency around costs in the system as it stands. So I think that's, if patients have a good understanding of, the cost value analysis, right? I can either make healthier choices or choose a holistic method or whatever that is, right? Preemptive well care, and it's going to cost me X versus I can wait for something bad to happen and it's going to cost me Y. How is that going to change my decision-making and autonomy in how I address and own the responsibility of that role, my role in my healthcare, right? And John, I think, you guys at Bind have some really interesting data points around this in terms of price transparency. And I know we had this conversation earlier as well. And another great analogy, right? Using kind of homeowners insurance. Will you share?
Yeah, no, absolutely. With Bind, one of the things that we try to do is get people, like I had talked about earlier, is to really take a step back and understand what their alternative treatment options may be. We have this concept that allows people to add coverage. So they can activate this coverage that they might not otherwise need unless they incur this particular event. So I was talking about a knee replacement. If you think about a knee replacement, typically speaking, I'm not going to encounter that care all that often, but I may need one maybe once in my lifetime. And why am I paying for that particular coverage throughout my whole life if I don't necessarily need it? And I'm burdening everyone else for paying for that. And I think of like homeowners insurance, to your point, Lindsey. If you think of your homeowners insurance and my ability to purchase homeowners, I go out, I get it, I understand what it covers, and relatively similar to my neighbors. And their homeowners insurance is relatively similar to their neighbors. But in the event that we've got some additional needs, maybe I've got a coin collection, maybe my wife has a handbag collection that I want to cover, what can I do? I can purchase a rider. And now I've got coverage that differs, that meets my needs. But I also might create a pause. And do I want to purchase that coverage, or maybe I want to find a different way to potentially, maybe I don't want to have a handbag collection. Well, the same thing comes with our product. We give people the ability to understand that, you know what, maybe a total knee replacement isn't the best solution for me. Maybe a better alternative is physical therapy. Maybe it's a pain injection. There's a lot of different ways that we can potentially have great outcomes, but we need to create a pause and help people understand that there may be different options for care that potentially have great outcomes for individuals. And it only comes through, again, creating that pause and that conversation that was mentioned, having those different dialogues with doctors. So we continue to do that and see great outcomes through actually engaging people in that process versus having that maternalistic approach where we just do what potentially our doctor says.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's some great stuff happening here in the chat, guys. Conversations around, tools that have to go beyond just education. And Balint, I think this is a great time for you to kind of talk about the role that design and product design can have in not just educating, but moving beyond to actually, educate with a result in behavioral change.
Yeah, so as John mentioned, it's really important to see practices even in other industries, and also I can see good practices in the health tech world where the payment is transparent and prices are transparent. So there must be a connection between the financial model and the actual user-centric behavior of a given application. For example, if we talk about the wellness sector, where we used to pay directly to the services, like for a jogging application or for a nutrition application or for a consultation on a lifestyle topic, we usually directly pay for that kind of subscriptions or services, and there is no too much middleman, so we can get value directly. And I think we can get the practices from this sector, and we can apply it somehow into the more difficult sectors where the patient journey is longer, is more complex, and the financial models are also more complex. But from a technical perspective, we should get that best practices which are out there. For example, there is an exciting practice in the gaming industry where for the players there are rewards. So you play video games because of the instant feedbacks and the rewards. You can see the development of your character or your journey, and we can apply this same reward system on the health as well, because if being healthy, keeping our health is something exciting and not just a static thing which we can forget, but can be an active thing which we can work for and which we can get rewards achieving or keeping that, then it can be a really good mechanic. And for example, there is a zombie run game which is a running application, but you have to run away from zombies within this gamified jogging application, and actually it's a good example, and many people are jogging because of this game, because of the virtual zombies, because it's a funny story. So we should apply this reward system. And there are many other examples, like the onboarding of Airbnb or Uber, where the users are really seamlessly integrated into the flow, and after that they can use really easily, naturally, on demand this service. So these are really good practices. And another thing is the human adaptation, because in the gaming industry, the users are usually that people who are prepared for that games. But in healthcare, we usually have patients who are not digitally native people. So the human adaptation is more important than in other industries. And if we take how the work, like in software development, shifted into the remote first approach, we can take good practices and apply for the human adaptation as well, because we not just need good technology, but we need the users, the patients who are adapted to the technology and using it carefully, and they are confident with it.
Thanks, Benny. Lindsey, I'd like to, if you don't mind, I'd like to jump in here and address a point that Mike Katsudakas, I hope I got that right, made in the chat, which was that he's basically saying, well, look, this is all well and good, but we have a population that is that makes poor lifestyle changes, and how are we going to convince them to play along, to exercise, to want to, as I think about it, purchase health, not just healthcare. And I think that point's spot on. And to me, this is probably the biggest challenge of all to this framework that we've been talking about here, because people they don't know that they should have agency. All we've ever known is a system of healthcare where people make decisions for us, and we and people pay for us. So how do we get people to change? Well, I think that is where we need to bring in the marketing expertise, one thing that we are really good at here in the United States, in other industries, is convincing people that there's this great thing that they didn't know they needed, but that they should. And Steve Jobs is probably the best example of that, where he created a fantastic experience and then convinced people that they couldn't live without it. And I'd love Julie to expound on this, because she's educated me on this. But I think that we need to use the power and the insights that our marketing colleagues have to convince people that if we create this great product, that they should value it, and here's why they should value it. And again, this is absolutely something that's incremental. It's not that we can do this overnight by any means, but I think that's the issue: is what is the value of being healthy, and how can we communicate that to people early and often in life, so that they don't become unhealthy in the first place and therefore need significant amounts of sick care. And that's why I also think that it's important that the industry that how can you merge sick care and well care so that they're not two distinct groups of people trying to do two distinct things, but one group of people trying to keep people healthy to deliver the product, that the value that they want, which is health. That's why, from when we kicked this off. So I'd love to, throw that back out to the community and both the panelists and the chat, and see where we go with that. Because I think that's going to be the hardest part of all of this, but also probably the area where there could be the most impact in the long run.
Yeah, and I think that there's a couple of things, a lot of really good information that just came out of, what you both just said. There is a lot around, the behavior changes, and there's a lot that can be done from a design perspective. I get a little nervous getting into the gaming side, because they kind of manipulate cognitive psychology to get people to do more. But there are some lessons learned there about how do we start to really drive behavior with a really good experience that's easy to use, delightful, and makes sense, particularly in healthcare. That said, it's more, again, combining all of these things so that we make better decisions. And what's interesting is that, health and wellness is in the wellness industry, and I include in that, and maybe incorrect in including it, but everything from gym memberships to diet programs to all that, it's billions and billions of dollars that go into that, particularly in January. Everybody decides to make changes. Well, what's motivating the changes, and why? And I think our society is very unhealthy in a lot of ways, because we promote, the quick snacks, the unhealthy foods, and make it look very attractive to Chris's marketing example. At the same time, we also kind of, unfortunately, from a social media perspective, we focus too much on quick wins of like, what's the quick way to do this? How can I accomplish either losing weight or getting healthy or doing whatever I need to do? And we just want those quick satisfactions. And so I think it's really like, how do we sort of change the way people think about health? Think about like, it's a journey. It's not a quick fix. There's so many things that are so important that people have in place. It's just like the car analogy. There are things you need to do regularly to keep yourself and your body healthy. But we don't often talk about those things. We certainly don't market them as things that are necessary. So again, it's sort of combining all these things. How do we create the right ecosystem of care and resources that make it easy for people to understand, easy for people to make choices, and that we're, between price transparency, transparency into what procedures are, what exactly happens, those are all important. But it comes down to fundamentally, we work with a lot of Medicaid. We also work with a lot of people in that are uninsured, that we have some employers that cover their uninsured employees, both part-time and full-time. And these people have not seen doctors in years, like 7-10 years. And so they don't even know where to begin. So number one is just giving people access. And once they get access, then they have the first step in getting them onto a healthier path. So again, it goes back to meet people where they're at. And sometimes that means give them access to care for free. Somebody has to pay for it, but it's like, get people access, and then we can start them on their journey. There's so many things from an innovation standpoint we can do to truly disrupt this market. It's not going to be a wholesale, like, let's fix healthcare. It's going to be the little things that we each do in an innovative way that starts to change the conversation, starts to require us to think differently about how we're delivering care, how we're educating people on care, and how we're motivating people to live healthier and to choose health as an option.
Let me join to Julie's opinion and with an example. HR departments are nowadays more and more interested not just in the high-level health of the colleagues and workers, like before, like providing plans and so on. But we can see more and more examples when they purchase exact solutions, exact subscriptions, exact applications for their colleagues, because they care a lot about the mental and physical well-being of their colleagues, and it's more and more part of the package, not just having a high level or financial level support, but exact accesses to exact solutions. So it can be a way innovating, because here we also can see a more direct payment and a more transparent pricing compared to the classical services and insurance coverages.
I think those are all really great points. And guys, the chat is just blowing up on all screens here. So what we're going to do now is actually wrap up with kind of final thoughts. And I'll start actually with you, Balint, since you're just wrapping up that thought as well. And what I'm going to ask each of the panelists to do, and Chris, we'll end with you last to kind of wrap up your thoughts, and then share with us where we can read the rest of your manifesto, if you will, is share with us, please, kind of as we've had this conversation and allowed ourselves to take the guardrails of the existing system, both identifying kind of what those problems are and then dreaming around what potential solutions could be. What do you think, with a blank slate, where would we need to start first, right? What is your top takeaway from this conversation? And then we will be continuing this conversation in the Slack channel as well. Balint, can we start with you?
Yeah, sure. So from my point of view, I believe that we should make real steps, even if these are small steps. And from a practical perspective, I can see a few fields where we can innovate easier, because we have less barriers. One field is the direct-to-pay services. And within this, the cheaper and smaller transactions, easier services like the wellness sector and the related mental and physical services. So this kind of applications, devices could be a great frontier, and it can have an impact on the other parts of healthcare, the more administrative part of it, where obviously a lot of work are needed, which is not just relying on a few companies, but still we have create great working examples.
Thank you. And in that vein, John, I'd love for you to comment on kind of from a payer reimbursement perspective, where we can start taking those small steps with insurance to incentivize and align those incentives for the system around a well care versus a sick care.
Yeah, it's a good question. And kind of going back to that blank slate, and I'll go back to one of my original comments. If you build highways, you get traffic. If you build a system that treats sick people, you will get sick people. And I think a lot of it goes back to what Julie said. When you give folks access to healthcare and you can get them to engage with the system prior to actually having manifested diseases, a stage 4 cancer, whatever it might be, we start to have better outcomes at lower costs, which benefits everybody, both the insurance payers, employees, employers. The whole system benefits from that. So I think, again, breaking down these barriers, making it really affordable and accessible for folks to engage in healthy activities versus waiting for it to manifest is likely one of the largest keys in making it more affordable and accessible.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. And I think also kind of from that perspective, the education, the responsibility, the context that's needed from a user experience, a patient experience perspective. Julie, I'd love for you to comment just on your kind of key takeaway here and where we can start to develop a system that actually puts the patient at the center.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'll go back to, again, it's access to care. The more we can break down the barriers to easy access to care that focuses on what that user needs and build the trust, that human connection, they'll see the value very quickly. And we see it every day on our platform. When they're able to easily connect with a provider that takes care of their need, all of a sudden it becomes so valuable to them. They don't want to ever let it go. I think there's the other thing I take away from this is really that shared accountability. How do we make sure across the board there is a shared accountability? It's a little outweighed right now and it's very skewed, and there's a lot of barriers and lack of transparency between it. So really engaging in that. And then I think there's just so much on the innovation side that can really drive a very different health experience to really make health a true product that's truly valuable to people. And there's a lot of great examples out there of people who, organizations, companies that are doing this already, but really making it so that it makes sense to users. Our healthcare is so complicated. It starts with access. It starts with understanding that user's experience, whether you're someone who's employed and has insurance and living in an inner city, to someone who's barely insured in a health desert out in rural America. Everyone deserves equal access and equal value to care. And so I think that's a huge opportunity for us all. And I agree with Chris. I think we'll get there. It's exciting times.
Thank you so much for that. And Chris, thank you for leading us through this thought exercise and just actually putting it out there. And I know you have kind of the full manifesto that you've written on this with some really, really salient points we didn't even have time to get to today. And I believe it's posted on your LinkedIn account, which if you could share in both the chats as well as in the Slack channel, and also the link to your Medium post as well. I want to encourage everybody to transition to the Slack channel. So please join us next month on February 28th for our next Rapid conference with a focus on pharma. Until we meet again, if you'd like more information on the monthly HealthTech Rapid Conference event series or the HealthTech Networking Club, please head to the Bene Studio website. We're now going to have a 3-minute networking break to talk to each other on the Slack channel. And once we return, Sandra Miller will be your moderator for the HealthTech Startup Award session. Networking Club members, please join me on Slack now for more networking and a chance to comment on the topic of the month. The link is in the Zoom chat, and to everyone watching the live stream, stay online and we'll be back shortly.
Sandy, you're muted.
Thank you. Welcome to the HealthTech Startup Award at the HealthTech RapidConf. This is our January event, and it's hosted by the HealthTech Networking Club. I'm Sandra Miller, CEO of Runway Innovation Hub, and I'll be your moderator. Thank you very much to Lindsey and the terrific panel for a lively and thought-provoking discussion around what product the healthcare industry sells. If you haven't already, please head over to the general Slack space and leave a comment about our topic of the month. So our esteemed panel of judges for the Startup Award consists of Roger Kopp, who's a venture partner at Going VC, Dr. Oren Ionichalis. Is Oren here?
I am. Hello.
Oh, great. There he is. Hi.
Hey. Good morning.
Good morning. Oren is CEO and managing partner at Global Health Impact Fund. Also with Global Health Impact Fund, we have Dr. Gary Goldman, who's a founding partner. And we have Mike Koutsoudakis, who's vice president at Paulson Investment Company, and Balint Bene, who's founder and CEO of Bene Studio. So I'm going to ask for each of the judges, and I'll call your name, to briefly introduce yourself and just give a flavor for your investment interests. So Roger, can you start off with telling us a little bit about you and Going VC?
Sure. So I am working with Going VC as a venture partner. So Going VC is actually a syndicate, and we partner with other syndicates. We typically invest in early stage companies, or I should say we only invest in early stage companies. That's pre-seed through Series A. We typically write check sizes of 100 to 250K. We don't lead rounds. We like to, follow and find a lead or have a lead in place already. And we are geographic agnostic, although we prefer US companies, and we're sector agnostic. So if you see any interesting deals, doesn't have to be healthcare. As I said, we're agnostic. Feel free to contact me on LinkedIn or send it my way. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you, Roger. And next up, we'll have Oren.
Morning, everybody. Morning, Sandy. Thanks for having me back. It's a pleasure to be here. What a great conference so far this morning. Lindsey did a great job. So I'm the managing partner at the Global Health Impact Fund, and we are an early stage healthcare venture fund. So we invest pretty much between Series A, Series C, and Series B. Early stage companies. We have a large physicians network that has a real strategic benefit to early stage companies.
Great, thank you, Oren. And next is Gary.
Yeah, well, I'll just add on to what Oren said, given that we're on the same team. So as the founder, my vision and mission was always to create a venture capital fund that was completely clinician driven, focused and funded. So our focus is digital health innovation with a flavor of really utilizing the clinical side of our due diligence to pick our portfolio companies and manage them moving forward with our clinician network.
Okay, so just to be clear, if somebody has a medical device, are you guys in that space or no?
Yes.
Okay, all right, great. And Michael Koutsoudakis. Michael, can you?
Please go ahead.
Go ahead.
Michael Koutsoudakis. I'm vice president of the private equity group at Paulson, a small boutique investment bank. We do Series A and bridge rounds primarily, about 70 sales folk, but the range of the raises ranges between 5 and 20 million, primarily in the health tech space.
Great, thanks, Mike. And next up, our final judge is Balint with Bene Studio.
Hello, everybody. My name is Balint Bene. I'm the CEO of Bene Studio, and Bene Studio is a digital product consultancy. We have a special focus on health tech, and I would like to share my product-related experiences and also to learn from all of you. And this event is about highlighting your products, your startups, and to support you. This video will reach several thousand viewers. So we hope that we can help highlighting all of your products, your efforts. So I'm really happy being here.
Great, thank you, Balint. So we have 5. You know, we were talking in the last panel about all the things going on in the healthcare industry, different approaches, but now we're going to hear from 5 companies who are in the trenches working hard every day to impact healthcare in some way. And so it is always a privilege to have the opportunity to hear from a company and from founders who are trying to do that, trying to make something new and awesome and help, particularly in helping healthcare. So we have 5 startups, as I mentioned, Quentin Bickley with Becker Smith Medical. We have Eva Gallegos with Avery Biomedical. We have Patrick Sammy, who's founder of Span, and Trevor Charleston with Freely, and David Sunderman Ooft from Modality. Now, we happen to have some people who are from San Francisco and Southern California. So we have some West Coast rivalries that we can tee up, NorCal versus SoCal. And then we also have some folks from the East Coast. We have a company from London and a company from New York, I believe. And so we can do some East Coast, West Coast stuff. So anyway, this is how we're going to run the session. Each startup will have 4 minutes to pitch. I'm timekeeper, and I will call you at about 4 minutes and ask you to quickly wrap up if you haven't done so already. Of course, all of our startups have practice for time and will end on time. But after the pitch, I'll ask the judges to briefly provide ask any questions and provide some feedback to the startups. We're probably not going to get every single judge in every round because we have a lot. So judges, raise your hand if you have something in particular to ask or feedback to give. But I'll make sure that we rotate. And after the Q&A, the judges will score the startups on a scale of 1 to 5. And judges, I'll ask you to hold up your hands and show me how many, if you want to give a 3 or 4 or whatever. And then, of course, the score with the highest, the startup with the highest score will be the winner for this month's HealthTech Startup Award. The winning startup will receive a planning session with Bene Studio to enhance the development of their product, which is quite valuable. And they also can have a one-on-one session with Runway Innovation Hub to help them on a variety of areas. And so also all startups participating in today's sessions are eligible for a free product discovery with Bene Studio. So we're going to get started with the pitch with Avery Biomedical. Eva's got her mask on. She's ready to go.
I do have my mask on. I'm actually now accompanied by our CEO, Linda Towler. So I do have my mask on.
We can roll with that. So we can hear you and see you, and your slides are coming up.
Yep. Okay, you can see the slides?
Yep, we're ready to go when you are.
Okay, cool. So my name is Eva Gallegos. I'm an engineer at Avery Biomedical. We're a small biotech company based in Long Island, New York, and we design, manufacture, and distribute the Avery diaphragm pacemaker, which can be an effective and superior alternative to mechanical ventilation. So we have patients in over 40 countries with spinal cord injury, brainstem injury, and central hypoventilation syndromes who are using the pacer and reaping the benefits of improved breathing and liberation from the mechanical vent. Still, diaphragm pacing really isn't widely known, and many eligible patients and their physicians might not be aware of this alternative. And patients who do wish to be implanted with our system often have to travel far distances just to find a physician who is familiar with the device. So although we're not really seeking actively investors for the company, we are looking to form connections and long-term relationships with clinicians and hospital systems who may be interested in potentially starting a pacing program at their hospital. So the Avery diaphragm pacemaker is a fully implantable phrenic nerve stimulator that uses implanted electrodes and receivers to deliver radio frequency current to the phrenic nerve directly. And this is done via external antenna, and which is connected to a transmitter that generates the current. So just to be clear, the internal equipment, so the receiver and the electrode, is fully implantable, so there's no transcutaneous wiring or tubing. So diaphragm pacing presents several key advantages over positive pressure ventilation, which is associated with complications including pulmonary barotrauma and ventilator-associated pneumonias. Pacing reduces the risk of these and improves respiratory muscle function and arterial blood gases through generation of intrathoracic pressures that mimic the physiologic condition. So negative pressure ventilation versus the kind of unnatural positive pressure generated by a mechanical vent. So patients can benefit from unrestricted mobility without the tether of ventilator tubing and setup, and enhanced verbal communication, swallowing, sense of smell, and just overall comfort. So the Avery diaphragm pacemaker is the only approved diaphragm pacing system for adult and pediatric use. The comparable competitor device is not approved for pediatric use at this time and presents several key disadvantages, including required wound care for life due to transcutaneous wiring and significantly higher operating currents, which result in increased risk for infection and cardiac arrhythmia, respectively. So we have a robust history of patient satisfaction. However, there are approximately 18,000 new spinal cord injury cases each year in the United States, and an estimated 1,000 to 1,200 cases of CCHS, that's congenital central hypoventilation syndrome, worldwide. So we're certain that there are many patients who could benefit from using our system that are either unaware of it or unable to get the necessary medical attention to do so. So again, we're just looking to collaborate with clinicians and hospitals who could be interested in implanting your device and possibly starting up a pacing program, of which there are a few. So in addition to improved quality of life for the patient, there are also financial advantages to diaphragm pacing. These are associated with reduced respiratory infections and fewer hospital readmissions. Pacing patients may or may not require ICU beds if they are readmitted to the hospital. And there's a reduced maintenance cost compared to patients who do rely on the mechanical vent, which are typically rented at rather high rates by insurance companies and require expensive disposable equipment. And finally, there's a reduced need and cost for nursing care, as many patients and families are easily able to operate their own equipment.
Okay, Ava,
and I'll leave it at that.
Do you have a closing statement, or did we get it?
That's it. Very good.
Okay, great. And you're looking for clinical adopters, sort of with hospitals and payers. That's terrific. Go ahead, Balint, to kick us off with.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. I really enjoyed it, and it's a really important topic. My question is regarding your revenue model. Could you talk a bit about it?
Yeah, so we make money by selling the device. Perhaps Linda can talk more about the actual revenue.
So we sell the device to hospitals. It's sold on the order of the physician. So we manufacture here in New York. Everything is manufactured in the United States. And so it's the difference between the price of the system versus our gross profit, and then any administrative expenses are deducted after that. And that's where you would make money for what's left over.
Thanks. And what's your plan for the upcoming years in terms of quantity or revenue?
Well, unfortunately, with COVID, elective surgeries are rather restrictive right now. So either hospitals are not able to get their patients in to be implanted because their ORs and their, I guess, ICU beds are being taken up with COVID patients, or the prospective patient themselves will want to wait until after COVID resides to be implanted with the system. But typically, we were on plan to sell between 50 and 75 units, which is very small considering what's out there, just with the physicians that we know now, that the centers that we have in place now.
Thank you for the information. It's a really important device and important problem to solve.
Yes.
Great. Thanks. All right. Any other final questions or comments, feedback?
Yeah, it's Gary. I got a quick question. So looking at this purely from a return on investment perspective, when you're out there marketing, clearly, when you compare this to the chronicity and complications of long-term ventilation and tracheotomies and the whole path that goes down, are you able at this point when you're marketing this to look at that and kind of estimate the long-term expenses to a patient in the healthcare system versus using something, as I'll say it as an anesthesiologist, as simple as this compared to the alternative?
Yes. So what we do for most hospitals is we present them with what you call a white paper that will eventually show how much it costs to be in an ICU bed, hooked up to a mechanical ventilator and the nursing costs associated with that, compared to being able to release a patient to either a step-down unit, which could be the rehab center, or to the patient's home, depending on the patient's need at that time. So that's a real savings to the hospital. In terms of our system, it pays for itself on average in 1 year, and then after that saves the hospital and or insurance company, depending on how you look at it, $20,000 a year, and that's conservative.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Great question, Gary. And thank you, Ava, for your presentation. That was great. And now, judges, can we get a score for Avery Biomedical? So let's show your scores. Okay, we've got a 5, 2 3s, a 4, and a 2. Okay, next up, thank you very much, Avery Biomedical. Next up, let's have Patrick Sammy with SPAN.
Hi everyone, I'm Patrick, the co-founder of SPAN Health. We're based in London and we are a consumer brand. SPAN aims to make nutrition simple and accessible, the same way Calm did it for meditation. So very much in line with the conversation we had previously. In terms of how we started this company back in 2019, I was borderline pre-diabetic. My blood sugar was elevated every morning, fasting. My co-founder Rachel, who's a registered nutritionist, grew up with a form of cancer that she essentially tried to improve the nutrition, at least live through the symptoms of chemotherapy better. And my third co-founder is a medical doctor, specialized in longevity and genomics. And in the same way, he saw a lot of patients that were coming in practice, but needed care that should have happened 10, 15 years ago in the optimal scenario. So what we're really trying to do is to empower millions to improve their health in an optimal way that expands their health span to the maximum. We talked just before about why now and what's something that's important to do right now, but I think there's two things. Digital health has become the de facto way of giving this type of lifestyle long-term advice to patients. in less than 3 months at the beginning of COVID. And it has also shifted the paradigm towards long-term health and fitness and showing why that's important, having a good immune system and things like that. Unfortunately, there's probably a lack of data in general, medical data, that would drive these kind of incentive and initiatives and say, if I have this intervention, I can drastically improve the health of my patients. But ultimately, what we can do is shift the paradigm towards prevention as the cure. And that's really what people want. What we've shown is that with a model where we focus really on young people who are 25 to 34, we've had amazing progress. The way we do it is through data-driven weekly experiments. And we've had 20% growth on a weekly basis with that model recently. It's delivered on a mobile application that essentially provides help directly to the patients, and it's delivered by registered nutritionists and coaches that provide more accountability. On top of that, we are helping patients track exactly how they feel instead of relying on exactly how much they're eating on a daily basis. That's something that's really driving them to improve themselves, and looking at the data every day, looking at the long-term progress, realizing how much progress they've made, which is really what the coaches and nutritionists struggle with. It's having a patient come back 1 month, 2 months down the line and saying, this is really the progress that they've made. And that's really driving the progress of patients. So what we're trying to do is bring as much data as possible that they already have by relying on existing devices and our own tracking algorithm. So that means Apple Watches, Fitbits, and all these devices that already exist. In terms of the model, we are currently working on those weekly experiments delivered through a chat consultation by nutritionists and coaches at $9.49 per month. And we also partner with platforms that deliver to employers on our behalf. In terms of our positioning today, we're focusing more on something that, like we discussed before, is continuous care and really driven by data, so individualized, and allows us, to provide a different level of care to a diet plan that maybe would be generic and apply to everyone. The team is composed of the 3 co-founders I mentioned before, and right now we have added an engineer and head of partnerships helping us to grow the team. We've also got an amazing board of advisors, mostly on the medical side, people who have dedicated their lives to behavior change and lifestyle-related conditions in various ways. They all have their own angle, Lucia being, for example, an expert in epigenetics and helping us identify from different populations what might be the interventions that will work to improve our algorithm and set up those patients with the weekly interventions that they really need.
Patrick, you're over time, so can you wrap up for me?
Yeah, I'll just skip to the last slide. So we're now raising $2 million to really grow that model and reach 100K of monthly recurring revenue.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Nice job. All right, so let's transition. Judges, any questions? I'm sure you have questions for Patrick. Let's see, let's start this time with Roger, and then Balint will go to you. Roger.
Yeah, hi, Patrick. Again, I have a bunch of questions, but I'll limit it to 2. So on your traction slide, it was a bit light. How many users, actually it's a 3-part question. When did you start? How many users do you currently have, and how many of those are paid? And then the second question is, I've seen a ton of companies doing the exact same thing. What's your differentiation and what's your defensibility, or your moat, so to speak?
Yeah. So on the history of the company, we started in 2019. We've talked about a lot of conditions like prediabetes and type 2 diabetes before. This is exactly the path that we took. We thought the people who needed the most are the best customers, and we can get them to pay. We can get the healthcare system in the UK to pay for them. And we recently found a model that's focusing more on the people who are the health optimizers, people who eat well, people who train for fitness purposes, people who just want to optimize their health in general and look at data to do so, and a consumer model. Right now we have 30 paid users, and we've found that model 3 months ago, so we've been going pretty fast, and now focusing a lot more on marketing to actually grow that part of the business. In terms of the second question you asked was about the
Defensibility.
the competition. The way we look at things is that no one in that space has really tried to bring the data and from different devices and platforms and really use that to drive the behavior change. Everyone is trying to coach the person into adopting what they think is the best thing, and that's the thing that's going to work for them. There's a lot of companies out now trying to provide micro receipts on small actions that people are doing on a daily basis, and to put data against those changes so that they can really be the drivers of their own health, essentially. So that's really the focus that we have that's a little bit different. From that point of view, there's probably two competitors that we look at. Zero Fast, which is in the same way using an app to track data and then drive better behavior and focusing on intermittent fasting. And another company called Levels that focuses on CGM-driven improvements. So providing daily data to be able to drive those nutrition decisions.
All right, great job again, Patrick. Thank you very much for sharing SPAN with us. Let's see, judges. What score do we have for Patrick? So we have a 3, 3 threes, 4 threes, 5 threes. Okay, great. I can do that math. Thank you, judges. Next up, we have Trevor Charleston, who is CEO of Freely. And I believe, Trevor, you're hanging out in the Bay Area today. So
yes,
we got
it's
going from London to West Coast. Here we go.
There we go. So full disclosure, this is going to be far less technical than some of the other presentations. But before I dive into Freely and mental health and all of that, I just want to say why it's so important to me. I grew up in a household with an alcoholic mom who was also an addict. Combine that with being bipolar. It was really, really tough for me at times, especially in my later teens, early 20s, where I wanted someone to talk to. I didn't want to talk to a friend because I felt uncomfortable. I didn't want to talk to a therapist because I didn't want to be diagnosed. I really just wanted a completely neutral third party to talk to, and I wanted to be heard. And so that's really why mental health is so important to me and why Freely is so important to me, because what we're doing is we're empowering everyone to feel heard. And so what is Freely? We are a teletherapy company, very similar to Talkspace and BetterHelp, providing professional counseling. But in addition to that, what makes us unique is we have a peer-to-peer, on-demand emotional support tool where anyone who is struggling with anything, depression, anxiety, whatever the case may be, they can open up the app, click a button, and immediately be connected with the trained listener. And they can do this anonymously and for free. No one else out there was doing it. Other platforms will connect via text. Other platforms will charge for the offering. But to get something that's completely anonymous, completely free, and voice, no one out there is offering. Taking a look at our team, I have a background in finance. I graduated from the undergrad program at Wharton. Our head of therapy, Molly Brummergan, was a lead therapist at BetterHelp. We've hired her away to kind of give us the inside scoop on how to build out the professional counseling division. Our COO and CTO are serial entrepreneurs, both of them with extensive experience. And then we have some amazing advisors, doctors at UCLA, USC, faculty at Pepperdine. And really, at the end of the day, what problem are we solving? We're democratizing mental health care. There are people out there that still don't have the ability to communicate their feelings and feel heard. And we want to break down those walls, and we want to make having those conversations as easy and accessible as possible. And the target customer is anyone. It's me, it's you, it's all of us. And when the studies show that of the 255 million Americans, adult Americans in the US, about 193 million of them have either gone to therapy, were in therapy, or are open to therapy. And so just thinking about potential market, I mean, it's massive. And then taking it one step further to market validation, you'll get companies like 7 Cups of Tea who have had more than 40 million conversations on their platform via text. You look at companies like Talkspace that have close to 2 million clients. I mean, the market is clearly there. In terms of where Freely stands with its current traction, we've brought on about 100 listeners to the app. We wanted to bring the listeners on first so that they could support the incoming calls when we do open the app up to the public. We're going to be launching in about 2 weeks. We're doing a pilot program with Pepperdine University, a bunch of students and the faculty there. So that'll be commencing in the next couple of weeks. Revenue model. It was really important for us to keep the peer-to-peer instant chat tool free. The way we do that is by offering and charging for professional counseling. The beauty is that that business, teletherapy, the margins were massive. And when we took a look at it, we said, you know what, we can offer teletherapy, we can pay therapists more, we can charge clients less, and we can still make money. Yes, our margins are smaller, but everyone at the end of the day wins. And so all the revenue really comes from the professional counseling. Exit, I would see a sale to an insurance company, a healthcare provider, or even a competitor. I think those are all very viable options. And I wouldn't be surprised to see that happen. We're asking for $1 million in seed funding that'll support the completion of the app. Currently, we have the on-demand portion built. Professional counseling still needs to be built out. Money will go towards that, hiring full-time staff. And that's all I got. 4 minutes. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Thank you, Trevor. All right.
A deck with anyone who's interested. I just didn't put it up there, but I do have one if you'd like to see it.
Okay. So any questions? Go ahead, Oren.
So Trevor, thanks. That was a great presentation. I think it's an important space that you're working in. I guess my question is, as an investor and as somebody who wants to see you be successful, I appreciate that this peer-to-peer conversation platform is important and that you'd like to keep it free. But I guess what I'm concerned about is your competitors, whether they have this platform or not, would charge the same amount even that you charge for your other services, thereby giving them better margins. And so I guess the value proposition you're making is that your peer-to-peer platform is more valuable than the margin that you would get that you're giving up to, as opposed to if you didn't have the peer-to-peer. And I'm having a hard time with that notion. And I wonder, just as a suggestion, if you did charge some moderate fee, but then for those people who had financial situations that made it difficult, you could make it free so that you could still provide that service in a way that it was more economically sound for the company.
I think sliding scale is a great option. That's definitely something to explore. It's really interesting in terms of, I'd love for you to see the pro forma financials that we built out. We're able to build, a business that does 5 million gross, 1 million net with not 10,000, 20,000, 1 million users. That only takes about 6,000 paid users to get to that point. And so for us, again, I like the idea of the sliding scale. I think there's also sort of a freemium type model that you could cater in as well. But our thought too is that if you charged for that tool, people would just end up connecting on the app and saying, hey, you know what, let's not chat via this app anymore. Let's just talk off the app.
Okay. So we're going to need sort of to have less sort of dialogue from you but it's always a balance because you're trying to answer the question and provide more info. Any other questions or feedback from judges for Trevor? All right. Let's go ahead and transition to getting scores for Trevor with Freely. So judges, and we'll sort of Gary had to leave, so we'll take care of that with the math wizards behind the curtain. So thank you. So we have a 2, 2 4s, and a 3. Thank you, judges. Okay. Last but certainly not least, we have David Sunderman-Off with Modality AI. David, can I hear your voice? I see your slides.
I hope you can hear my voice.
Yes, okay, we can hear you. All right, so we're ready to go.
Okay, we are Modality AI, headquartered in San Francisco. We are focusing on assessing neurological conditions through the power of multimodal artificial intelligence. I'm going to explain to you in a minute what that means. We're talking about conditions such as depression, like we just heard about, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, ALS, autism, you name it. All these conditions have in common that it is very hard to assess them. There's no objective measurement in place today. Standard of care is paper and pencil surveys or eye and ear exam by the neurologist, identifying whether the condition has improved or deteriorated since they saw the patient 6 months ago. This all resulting in, first of all, very hard complications to track the progression of the disease and providing care, but also in the development of drugs as biomarkers. On the other hand, that many of the drug trials fail today, and that one would wish there was a way to objectively measure these conditions, do so in an accessible fashion, virtual fashion, and an accurate fashion. And that's basically what we're addressing with Modality. We have built a platform that is based on the idea that patients are engaged with our system in a conversation, with a virtual agent in a conversation that emulates the very standard of care, the very interviews and the very questions and speaking tasks that neurologists, psychiatrists, and speech pathologists are normally carrying out at the clinic. And while this interview is happening, we are streaming the speech responses of the patients and the facial movements, and also the limb movements, finger movements, for example, for Parkinson's assessments, into the cloud. And we're extracting in real time highly accurate facial and speech measures that have been shown in many years of clinical studies to correlate with the clinical endpoints, being predictive of the progression of these conditions. So there's two major markets where we are applying this, but I want to talk about one because we have only 4 minutes today, which is a bigger one: remote patient monitoring. So imagine you're a neurologist and you want to assess your patient. You can only see one patient at a time. With our system, according to the chief physician of the Peter Cohn Foundation, who is a customer of ours, he can now see 1,000 patients at a time because you can basically emulate and use us as remote patient monitoring tool. Not only do you scale and save time, you have more accurate measurements. You can do this from home, having people virtually do this every month, every week if needed. But also there's an additional revenue stream for the provider because these services are reimbursable today. We have a clinic in Nebraska, our first partner clinic, who has received, based on pre-existing CPT codes, reimbursement by Medicare, Blue Cross Blue Shield. So these things are actually constituting a humongous opportunity because there's hundreds of millions of people worldwide who are suffering from either one of these conditions we can address here. A $45 billion market opportunity, which with an obtainable addressable market, serviceable market of $3 billion in the US. Now, where do we stand in terms of traction? We are working with the most prestigious universities in the United States. We are IRB approved 8 times. We are in live data collections and trials and studies all around the country at UCSF with autism, MGH with ALS, Parkinson's disease with Purdue, NYU, we are live with schizophrenia patient at the Manhattan Psychiatric Center, and so on. We have also commercial partners, smaller clinics, smaller biotech companies who are planning and preparing phase 2 trials for their development of the drugs with our systems as well. So that's us. My name, DSO. I'm an artificial intelligence expert. I've led own companies, R&D teams in larger enterprises. I was full professor of computer science. I published more than 160 papers and numerous patents in the space. I also led engineering of a company in New York City, which we sold, that processed more than 1 billion interactions of the kind I was talking about. Our ask, we have just closed a pre-seed round of $500,000 in December, and we are now raising $1.5 million plus of a seed round, which we would like to close in Q1.
Great, thank you very much, David. Mike, I wanted to check in if you have a comment or question. I wanted to make sure I wasn't missing you. Oh, you're on mute.
Well, Mike and I, we know each other from the building. We're actually co-located in the same space in downtown San Francisco.
That's awesome.
149.
Between the headset and everything else. Yeah, David and I bumped shoulders quite often, had extensive conversations, but yeah, excellent speech. I really don't have anything specific relating to the product itself. I mean, somebody like you pretty much outlined what the merits were, what the potential return is going to be for the investors, the participants, and it seems like the ask on 1.5 million is relatively low and feasible. So nothing from a constructive criticism way. Yeah, you've got 4 minutes. You're amped up. It's perfectly understandable that you're going to be speeding along. I don't know what to take out, but just might want to slow down a little bit. Just that's the only thing I've got.
Okay, thanks, Mike.
Sure.
And Balint.
Yeah, so thanks for the presentation. I learned a lot from this, and what I'm curious about is two things: the business model, revenue models, and the competitive landscape.
Yeah, very, very happy. The business model is actually we are a SaaS company. We are a pure tech company. So we are selling our services for a number monthly active users per seat, pretty much. It's almost like Slack. It's the same sort of model. We are selling to the providers. The providers get reimbursed by the insurances, but we are directly dealing with the clinics and the hospital systems, and on the other hand, also with biopharma companies and pharma companies who are using us in their clinical trials. But it's a very simple subscription agreement, typical SaaS. Competitive landscape, I'm very happy to announce that there's not a single company, as far as we know, in the world that is able to basically do dialogues of full-scale dialogue of the nature that the physicians do, and at the same time assess speech and facial movements and extract these real-time biomarkers, and do so on any device that has a webcam and the microphone through the browser. Any sort of companies that are coming close are some that are collecting speech measures through apps such as Oral Analytics or Winterlight Labs, but that's something which we do anyway, but we are doing much more than this.
Thanks.
Any other comments or questions?
I think Roger's.
Oh, Roger, yes, thank you.
Yeah, hi, David. I hear some feedback. I don't know if it's on your end or mine, but in any case, I liked the presentation. On the presentation, I'll give it a 4. On the merits, we'll see. So I have some questions, and I don't know if it was covered. I might have missed it. What are your unit economics, like your margin and so forth? And I think I may have missed, you might have covered traction, but I might have missed that part. If I did, I apologize.
Happy to cover
I need you to do it quickly.
Yeah, very, very quickly. So we charge between $15 and $20 per month and patient. The cost for this, for hosting these assessments during the months, are in the pennies. So we are talking about margins of over 95% for what we're doing. It's all cloud computing. We do not do any manual services. In terms of traction, we are starting to collect revenues now. Most of the partnerships with universities were non-commercial agreements. The commercial agreements are going to ramp up to about 300,000 ARR this year.
Great. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you again, David. And judges, let's get a score for David with Modality AI. So we've got 4s across, 3 4s and a 5. All right, thank you very much. So I'm gonna let the team behind the curtain tally everything up and tell me who the winner is. So I'm waiting for that. Let's see. So I want to thank all of the startups for their pitches and judges for your feedback and questions. And again, everybody, all the startups today are eligible for a free product discovery from Bene Studio. And the prize for the winning startup is a one-on-one coaching session with Runway and a product discovery session with Bene Studio. Also, the winning startup will be highlighted as the HealthTech Startup of January, and with an exclusive interview published in the HealthTech Networking Club page and across Bene Studio media channels. And we also amplify all the startups who participate in these programs. And so our results are in, and it was pretty close at the top, but Modality has the prize for January this month. So congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks also for looking at the math, because it was a little bit complicated, right? Because you had fewer judges at the very end. So I really appreciate your feedback and the opportunity to get to know you all and also work with Bene. I'm really excited and enthusiastic to get to know you better and potentially leverage these services.
Thank you so much, David. Yeah, we're excited. And let's see. And Quentin, I would encourage you to provide. You may want to record yourself giving your presentation with over some slides, and the team and Trevor as well, so that because truly thousands of people will view this, and so get your slides in there, because people are visual learners as well. So thank you everyone for attending the HealthTech Startup Awards, and a big congratulations to our winner. And so for more information on our invitation-only networking club that connects startups, investors, healthcare providers, and other key players in the health tech industry, or more information on our monthly rapid conferences, please head to the Bene Studio website. Thank you for joining us. Please join us next month on February 25th for our next RapidConf. So please feel free to keep networking with each other on Slack. Have a great day and see you next month.